Hi, my name is Emanuele Colombo. I'm a professional motion designer and animator from Italy, and today I'm going to teach you about the principles of animation. The principles of animation were first introduced by two Disney animators, Ollie Johnston and Frank Thomas, in their book The Illusion of Life, which was released in 1981. In this book, Johnston and Thomas examined the work of the leading Disney animators from the 1930s and summed up their approach into 12 basic principles. These principles now form the basis of all animation work. Many refer to it as the Bible of animation, and they are relevant for a number of different fields. The most obvious use is for animating a character, but these rules are also useful in all sorts of motion design, like animating text, animating brand logos, and even animating user interfaces. To help us understand the 12 principles, let's see some examples. The first one is squash and stretch. Squash and stretch gives the illusion of weight and volume as something moves. This is done by slightly expanding and compressing forms. This principle is arguably the most important because it really gives a clear sense of gravity as a character moves. The second principle is anticipation. Anticipation is used to let the audience know that a major action is about to take place. To do this, animators will often work in a smaller action or two right before the major action to signal that something is coming and get the audience excited. The third principle is follow-through and overlapping action. Follow-through is the idea that when something is moving and stops, nothing stops all at once. This is a key for adding realism to the scene, giving the impression that an object responds to the laws of physics. So when a character is running and stops, their main body will stop, but the other parts of their body will keep moving for a bit after. The fourth principle is arcs. Almost all action in life have a slightly circular motion, and animation should stick to the same principle. When you move your arm or wave your hand, you rarely do it in a perfect straight line. The fifth principle is slow in and slow out. Slow in and slow out refers to the tendency things have to start and stop moving gradually. This is another one designed to add realism to the movement of characters. When something is performing an action, you will draw more frames at the start of the action, less in the middle, and more again at the end of the action, to create this easy in and easy out effect. The sixth principle is timing. This is a technical one. Timing refers to a number of drawings or frames for a given action, which translates to the speed of the action itself. By adjusting the timing of a scene, animators can make that scene look either slower and smoother with more frames, or faster and crispier with less frames. The seventh principle is secondary action, little movements that are not essential but that helps to add meaning to an action. The eighth principle is exaggeration. Exaggeration presents an action in an extreme form for a comedic or dramatic effect. It tries to overstate to evoke a point without ruining the believability of the scene. The ninth principle is staging. Staging is the principle that directs the audience attention towards the most important elements in a scene. The 10th principle is straight-ahead action and pose-to-pose. These are two different techniques used in frame-by-frame animation. Straight-ahead action is where you draw each frame one after another. With pose-to-pose, you draw the extremes, the beginning and end drawing of an action, and then you go on the middle frame and start to fill the frames in between. Straight ahead is better for creating fluid, realistic actions, while pose-to-pose is more effective for dramatic or emotional scenes, where it's more about conveying an idea than a sense of realness. The 11th principle is solid drawing. Solid drawings is all about making sure that animated forms feel like they are in a three-dimensional space, even though they are shown in 2 dimensions. The last principle is appeal. Animators should strive to create something interesting and compelling to audiences.
I'm going to be showing you how to use the Animation Assist in Procreate. This is a great way to add personality to your illustrations. Today I'll be walking you through how I add movement to the cat's tail and eyes. At the moment my scene is in lots of different layers, but for the animation I just want the cat and the background to be on separate layers. I could merge them down now, but I don't want to lose the original layered file. So I'll go back to the gallery and duplicate the illustration. Now that I have my layered file saved, I can carefully start to pinch the layers down to merge them, making sure I keep the background and the cat separate. So now that you've merged them, you should have two separate layers, one with the cat and one with the background. So I'll head over to the spanner here and then go to Canvas and turn on Animation Assist. Before we get started, I'm going to click on the frame and turn this to background. This way it will make sure my background layer is going to be on all the frames of my animation. I'll then go to my cat layer and duplicate it. I'll start to remove the tail, and now that I've got Animation Assist turned on, you can see that the frame below has become an onion skin, and this is going to help show us where to put the next frame. And before I trace over this frame, I'm going to duplicate the cat without a tail, so I've always got a copy of that. Then I'll go back to this layer and I'll start to draw a slightly different tail on top. So I want to make sure the line is coming out of the same place as the tail before, but I want movement in the tip of the tail. So I'm going to slightly change that up, and then I'll fill it in. So just got to get that really neat. And as you can see, I haven't completely traced it because I want it to slowly move. So I'm going to duplicate it again, and then on the layer below, I'm going to repeat this process. So take your time with this. And then I'll just repeat the process over and over until I slowly have the tail coming onto the other side. If you're still unsure on how it moves, then you can check out some videos online, or if you have your own cat, maybe you can watch your cat's tail. Then I'll go back to my frames down here and press play so I can watch how the tail is moving to make sure that it's smooth and it's moving how I want it to. So it's getting quite hard to see where to draw next just because there's so many layers here. So I'm just going to go to settings and put down my onion skin frames from 6 to 2. And that way it will only show the 2 onion skins below this frame. I want to make sure my animation is set to ping pong and not loop. If I select loop, it will jump back to the beginning and you won't have this smooth back and forth motion. So once I'm happy with the tail, I can move on to creating movement for the eyes. So I'm going to head over to one of the frames and paint over the eyes. Then I'll do the same for the frame above. This way it will keep the blink for slightly longer. I'm just going to see what my cat looks like if I add another blink further on. And then I'll just press play and check to see how that's looking. And I'm not really happy with how many blinks there are. So I think I'm just going to keep it to one blink. I think it just looks a bit more natural. So it's completely up to you how long you have the wink for. Maybe you want to do it a bit longer, or if you want to have it even quicker, then just have one frame without the eyes. And here's the final animation. So I hope you guys were able to follow along and you have all the tools now to bring your illustrations to life. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with.
Hello, fellow illustrators, art makers, creators, and animators. Exciting news! A fresh new app has just landed, ready to take you to a world filled with movement and magic where you can bring your dreams to life. I'm talking about Procreate Dreams, a new 2D animation app from the makers of Procreate. This new app has expanded my creativity in so many ways, and I know it can do the same for you, even if you have no animation skills at all. I'm Lisa Bardot, and I help people find their creativity through drawing and now animating on the iPad. I've helped millions of people all over the world learn new art-making techniques and discover their inner artist. For over a decade, I've been pushing the boundaries of making art on the iPad, and now animation has become an exciting addition to my creative process. For this lesson, we're going to be animating leaves kind of tumbling and floating down from a tree. So we're going to be creating this kind of like falling, tumbling, twirling type motion using the perform feature. And I love this technique because it's so easy to do, but it looks really dynamic. And we're also going to talk about grouping animations and duplicating them and adjusting timing and things like that. Okay, so we've got our Autumn Leaves Dreams project opened up here. And this is all set up and ready for you to animate, but let me show you a little bit about what is in all these tracks. So I'm going to take 3 fingers and swipe up so we can zoom in vertically on our tracks and get a better look. So starting at the top, we have our yellow leaves, each on its own track so that we can animate them individually. So we've got leaf number 1, number 2, and number 3. It's these like 3 solid colored leaves. And then we've got our front foliage, which is just this like orange shape here, our tree trunk. And then we've got the 3 back leaves, which are the solid color leaves here, number 1, number 2, and number 3. We've got the back foliage, and then of course our sky. So that makes up our entire scene. So today we're going to be animating the leaves kind of like tumbling and falling down, twirling around, that sort of thing. So we're going to be doing all of our animations using the performing feature. And let's start with our yellow leaves. So I'm going to zoom in. I always like to scale up vertically so that my timeline is nice and big. And let's make sure we select our front leaf number 1 and move our playhead all the way to the beginning of the track. So to create these kind of like tumbling leaf animation, we're going to be rotating our leaves and then we're going to move them down and we're going to perform all of that. So let's go ahead and enter performing mode. Tap the little circle right there and it should say ready. And then I'm going to zoom in because we're going to rotate first. I want to get a good look at that. And make sure again that your playhead is at the beginning of the timeline. And to rotate, we're just going to tap the corner node and grab the little noodle, the little rotation node, and then just rotate around. It doesn't have to be like a consistent movement. It can go slow and then fast. Kind of the more irregular it is, the more organic it's going to look. And we'll just animate it until it gets to the end of the timeline. Cool. And then I'll zoom back in. And then we're going to move the playhead back to the beginning again because now we're going to animate it going down the tree like this. So I'm going to zoom all the way out and then we're going to make it come down and we're going to do kind of like little S motions. So let's go ahead and do it. Ooh. There we go. So it's spinning as it's tumbling down and kind of going side to side and this really fun kind of animation. Let's go ahead and tap pause and we will work on our second leaf. So we're going to go to front leaf 2. And for this one, I'm going to do kind of like a back and forth swaying. So make sure the playhead's at the beginning. tap the corner, grab the little node, little rotation node, and we're going to go back and forth, these big motions. There we go. We probably don't have to animate all the way to the end because it'll go out of frame before it finishes. So let's go back. And now we'll get it going down. And we'll also go kind of back and forth like that. Now, this kind of takes a little bit of practice because this one, you kind of have to time it right to the rotation. So I'm going to undo with a 2-finger tap and try that one again. So it's kind of pointing that way first. So I think I'm going to have it go that way. There we go. That's a little better. So it's kind of just going. You get a feel for the movement, which is really fun with Perform. Okay, let's do number 3. We're going to go to front leaf 3, move our playhead to the beginning, and we're going to do some rotations. And maybe this one will do like a slow kind of rotation. Nice and slow. If you do kind of like an oval shape, it'll be slow and then it'll like speed up as it turns. So you can kind of play around with what shapes you draw to create different types of kind of rotations. All right, so we've got that one spinning. And now let's zoom out so we can animate it coming down. And we'll just go, I like that one going in front of the trunk. You really see it. All right, so now we've got our 3 leaves coming down. And we'll just do a quick preview with 4-finger tap so we can see how things are looking so far. But I think those look great. So let's go ahead and go back and we will animate our back leaves here. Tap back, pause, and let's go down until we find back leaf number 1. And zoom or scroll all the way to the beginning of the timeline. And we'll zoom in on this guy. And for this one, I'm going to do the swaying motion, but maybe not quite so big so it doesn't go so far to the side. So I'm going to do like smaller motions back and forth. Nice and slow, like that. Almost doing like a figure 8 with my Apple Pencil. Okay, good. And now we'll animate that one coming down too. So that one's not like going back and forth quite as much because of those smaller movements, but I think it still looks good, especially when it's grouped with all the other ones. And let's do the next back leaf. So let's go to back leaf 2. All right, so for this one, we'll do like a spin, and then maybe we'll like stop and go the other way. We'll see how that looks. All right, it's pretty good. Let's go back and we will animate that falling down. Good. I think it went down before it went the other way, but that's okay. Really looks really good. Okay, one more leaf to do. And we'll animate this one spinning. Maybe we'll do kind of a faster spin. It was really irregular. Woo. All right, that's probably enough. And then we'll animate that one coming down. Good. All right, let's take a look at how that's all looking. Awesome. We have a lot of variation in the way that the leaves are coming down, and I think the more variation you add, the more natural this looks. Let's go ahead and tap back. And now let's use what we've already animated to make this even more full with falling leaves. So let's go up to the top and find our 3 front leaf tracks. So let's go ahead and we'll go into edit timeline mode, and we're going to select these 3 leaf tracks. And then we're going to tap and hold on one of them and choose group. And now they're in a group. And now let's get out of our edit mode, tap and hold on that group, go to track options and choose duplicate. So now we have 2 copies. Okay. And we can do something as simple as moving this down the timeline a little bit, like that. Maybe a little bit further. Now, the only problem with doing it this way is you can see up here, there's no leaves, and then boop, there's leaves again. So that might not bother you, but if it does, we can do something different. Instead of leaving it where it's at, we can just move our animation group up so that it's coming into frame. And then it should animate down. Now, the only problem with that is they kind of get stuck where we didn't quite animate it low far enough down, but we can fix that. Let's just go into the group and find those 3 leaves. Nope, not that one. This one is one of them. And then we'll just scroll back until like right before it stops. And then we'll go to performing mode and just continue the movement. Make it go down. So now, there we go. And then the other one would be this one. So it kind of stops right there. So let's start here. And then we'll just continue the movement. Ta-da! Like it never happened. Okay, so let's go ahead and also duplicate our back leaves. So let's go down here and we're gonna go into edit mode, select these 3, tap and hold, choose group, out of edit mode, tap and hold, and choose track options, duplicate. And we can do pretty much the same thing that we just did. We can move it down the timeline a little bit. We can, thankfully, this one doesn't have the same problem quite as much. Like they do kind of just like start to appear there. Maybe I'll scooch it over a little more. But we can move this up just a little bit so it's behind, you know, behind the tree, or the foliage. Now we have all those coming in. You can slide back and forth. Maybe we'll move it down a little bit more. So those ones happen a little later. And we only have a tiny problem right there with that one, just like the little tip of it is hanging out. So let's open up that group and find that one and just continue the movement. There we go. So we'll go right there, go to perform, and then just continue it on down. Super easy to fix. So now let's go ahead and see how this is looking in full screen. We're going to take 4 fingers and tap. We can tap the back button to start at the beginning and play. Yay, look at all those fun leaves that we just made very easily, especially when you start duplicating them, and you could keep duplicating them to keep the leaves coming down as long as you wanted. I hope you had fun learning how to do that beautiful kind of like tumbling, twirling, falling leaf animation. That one's a lot of fun, and it's a really versatile type of animation because you can use it for other things that might fall. So if you have snow falling, it would probably go in the same pattern, or if you have like maybe a feather like slowly coming down, anything that kind of like falls and does this type of motion, that sort of animation would do well for. So I hope you had fun with that one.
I'm Danni Fisher-Shin. I'm an animator and illustrator, and I have a great Skillshare class for you on animating a walk cycle in Procreate. Today I'm showing you an exclusive preview of my class. Let's get started. So now that we've cleaned up our base animation, we're ready to start adding secondary animation. Now this can sound kind of intimidating, but it's really just anything that isn't directly attached to the base animation that's kind of flowing off or affected by other physics. Secondary is honestly one of my favorite parts of animation because it can take something that has up till now been very technical or very like static and kind of just like a process and turn it into something that has a lot more extra flair and a little bit more of a personality. Examples of secondary include anything that's not directly attached completely to the body. So this could be like hair or a jacket that's hanging off or a skirt or anything loose and flowy. That's going to have different physics from our main body and it's going to be affected by other elements. This is where you can kind of add a little bit more of that stylization and kind of like push stuff, and it adds a really nice extra touch to it. So as you can see here, I've kind of animated a little bit of an example where it's kind of like a string attached to a fixed point that's being affected by the up and down motion or by a wind kind of like invisibly blowing past it. So this is pretty straightforward in terms of what you would normally imagine, like say a flag or anything that's hanging off of anything else really. I like to think of it as a string. And I think that that tends to help when you have to piece different secondary pieces together, of just thinking of each side or each part of them as an individual string that's then attached at another point. And I'll go into that a little bit more if that seems kind of weird or complicated. So now basically what I'm going to do is start adding in the hair with the same principle of a string being attached to a static point. Now, in this case, the hair is basically a triangular string attached to the static point of her head. And her head is going to be moving a little bit, so I'm going to have it move with that as well. But if you look at it all together, it's basically the same principle of a wave. And you can see here if we go through the onion skins. One thing that you can tell in this wave as well is that it's really just in-betweening, and it's not too much of a gap between any of them. It's a fairly even motion since this is one continuous walk cycle. We don't really need much ease on this except for maybe on these big arcs on either side, but pretty much it's fairly static in terms of motion change. And it doesn't have too much ease either way, just a little bit on maybe the top arcs of each arc that it's doing, but it's nothing crazy. And that's because we want it to look continuous with this motion that we have of the head just going up and down. And you can see that these two animations basically match. And what I've done is I've attached her hair to her head, and I've basically just moved this base of her hair and rotated it to where her head needs to be. And this wave animation is basically what you're going to keep in mind for the entire rest of the secondary animation. You just take this very simple piece and kind of use it to your will, like change the direction or change the angle, and pretty much use that type of movement for the rest of all of this. So once you have down this wave animation, you can even make a practice one if you'd like on your own, like this blue example, just to kind of get the hang of it before trying to attach it to your moving object. When you're animating a wave or a more continuous motion like this, it can be a little harder to finesse the loop point. So I'm going to be, again, referencing my first frame at the very end over and over again. And that's something that can be kind of trial and error as you're going through and making these increments fairly even, following your general waveform movement. You can adjust, and if this is looking too close or too far, too big of a jump, you can go back and add a little bit more of a gap between these earlier frames or tighten them up a little bit, just so that once you get to that final frame jump between these two, it's looking a little more natural, just like it's a natural continuation from the frame before. If you just finesse and you keep referencing your first frame, you'll be able to get it. So now we're going to start animating our next secondary elements, and this same wave principle is going to be applied throughout all of these. So for this example, I'm kind of adding, as you see in the design, this front part of her jacket, and I'm going to animate that part separately from the rest of it just so that I can get that movement down and then add the rest in a way that makes sense. So as you can see, I'm following the same waveform, but this is going to be a slightly different variation because I don't want her jacket to feel as loose and flowy as her hair. I want it to have a little bit of weight to it. So it's not going to move as much with the wave, and it's going to move a little more slowly. So while animating this particular type of wave, I noticed that when her arm swings back, it was kind of at a point where naturally the jacket would have come inwards and hit it. So knowing that the jacket should naturally be affected by the arm pushing it back, I kind of wanted to show that a little bit, which makes my waveform less uniform, but it also adds a nice little bit of extra flair. So I'm going through, and as you can see, it kind of poofs out from where her upper arm would have hit it. And that kind of propels this bigger wave motion compared to the earlier ones, just to show that extra push and have that little bit of extra quickness and motion from the arm kind of translating into the wave. So now I'm going to take that same wave principle and apply it to this piece right here, attaching wherever this attaches behind the hip to this corner here that we already have. And I'm going to take that wave, and it's basically one of the straightest waves that we have just because it's so perfectly between those 2 points. So if you play it through, it's just the same exact thing that we've been doing, but just making sure that this side stays attached to that corner. Since this is the part after the arm has kind of hit it and is poofing out, you can kind of see that since this waveform got bigger, our lower one follows that with that big movement that kind of started at the shoulder there. And that's something that'll happen naturally as you kind of attach these ends, because this one had such a big movement, this one also has to. So you'll kind of see that even just watching this corner, you see how the wave needs to go for that bottom piece, because it's already going in a wave motion. And that's something that can be helpful as you're trying to attach 2 different points in something like this. So now we're just going to continue using the same principle across all of the secondary animation that we have. The next step for this design in particular is to add this sleeve here, which is the main sleeve that we'll be seeing in the animation. So going through and adding that, I'm again following the same wave motion, but I'm going to have it follow the up and down of the shoulder a little bit, and this part where the jacket is affected by the shoulder in this front piece that we were looking at, we're also going to have it affect the sleeve a little bit since that sleeve is hanging off of the shoulder. As we're going through and adding the wave, it's going to be messy and we're going to have to kind of go back and rework a little bit. So just keeping it really loose at the beginning and then tightening it up as we lock the motion down a little more is going to save you a lot of headache. So now we're adding the final touches. There's just one final secondary sleeve behind the main sleeve, and you can see that I've kind of offset the waves a little bit just because I know that it's not only attached to her back shoulder, but I also just want to show kind of an even more secondary animation. It's the same principle of offset that we were using for the hips and the head, etc. I'm just applying that to these two sleeves so they aren't kind of moving as one chunk because that wouldn't be as fun. And you can see that here. I'm kind of hiding one of them behind the other because that's what would naturally happen as I move separately. And I've even added a little bit of dimension to the sleeve holes. I kind of want them to turn away from us slightly as they're moving in one direction and then kind of open up as they would come forward. So you can add little bits of extra kind of three-dimensional attention to your pieces as they move, and that'll add a really nice extra touch to it. One thing that I'm doing as I'm going through and adding all of these different elements of the animation is I'm keeping everything on separate layers. That's partially because my brain is kind of just wired to do that from my professional animation background with working non-destructively, but it's also because as I'm going through and adding all of these different elements, they're going to be moving separately and I'm going to want to be able to edit them separately. And it's way easier to do that when they're on their own layers. It'll also help later with filling and cleaning up if I'm able to fill each of the layers individually rather than having to go through and cut them out and then recolor them again. That was one lesson from my Skillshare class. Check out the link below for more info and to join me in creating a full